welcome to Fictional Narrative. It is Cozy Saturday. It is actually another follow-up Cozy Saturday. And this week we are talking about The Pies Before Guys mystery by Misha Popp. And as with all follow-up videos, these are going to be spoilery. Much like the Antique Bookshop mysteries, I binged this series. There's only 3 in the entire series at this point, and they were all so good. If you haven't heard about this, or you want to just see what I have to say about the first book first and then make the decision whether or not you would like to read the series, I do have a video up on my page. It should be my Cozy Saturday playlist, which will give you the review of the first book, which is Magic, Lies, and Deadly Pies. In this video, we're going to be getting into a lot of spoilers because I have a lot of thoughts, especially that last book. So in the first book, Magic, Lies, and Deadly Pies, we're introduced to our main character, Daisy Ellery. And she is someone who has had a very tough upbringing, and I believe she's only about 23, 24, but since she's been 17, she's kind of been on the run. Basically, Daisy was like, I am in a situation where I gotta get out of there. And unfortunately, the situation is how she finds out she's able to bake pies that kill people. Before you think this series is a cozy mystery, therefore she's the killer, and so are we just trying to find her all the time? No. Essentially, she's kind of found a little bit of a home and a little bit of a found family, and she's parked Penny. It's basically like what she lives in is her van, Penny, and she bakes out of it. She has a business, 2 businesses. One is Pie Before Guys, which fuels her as a serial killer, kind of. Like, she's a serial killer for a good reason. Like, think Dexter, if Dexter was a witch and kind of untraceable. Her MO is basically baking and delivering a pie to men who have put women in profoundly abusive situations where they have to go. Now, the thing is, they have a chance to live. Okay, the magic in the pie either gets them to change their ways, or if the magic finds that they absolutely can't, it kills them. Now, I do want to be fair. It's not like Daisy is someone who is without her flaws. Often we deal in these books with her moral quandaries of the fact that she's a serial killer, but she's not a monster because she's taking care of monsters. But she's just one person who has this one ability, and does that make any difference? And she often asks this because she has 2 wonderful people in her life. Actually more than 2, but we're talking about love interests, right? In book 1, we're introduced to Noel and Melly, and it's kind of a love triangle. Melly is a college student who is an activist and who loves feminism, and, you know, she knows Daisy's secrets and love what she does and understands the necessity in it, because these men technically do have a chance. By the way, she only kills men. It's not like women can't also, you know, be perpetrators of these crimes, but for her and her personal trauma, her victims are men. Noel is a really great guy who owns this farm and he's just generally a good guy, but they find each other at odds all the time because technically she's a criminal and he's a guy who, although has had issues where he's had to be arrested and expelled and has to face expulsion from his school for shrooms of all things because he wanted to, like, help depression. That's the storyline. Okay. He has very positive things to say about, you know, law enforcement, and it is a point of contention between them because all of her life Daisy's been running away from the law as she sees it. So anyway, Daisy has found herself in this little town, and she's parked Penny in this lot that is owned by Frank. She uses some of his she uses some of his utilities, and in exchange, she bakes pies for his diner. She's become very close with Frank, who has taken a fatherly role in her life, and Juan, who is kind of a big brother figure to her. And Juan is very sweet. In the first book, we find out that him and his husband are looking to adopt. And by the end of this book, they found the little girl that they want to adopt, and everything is approved, and they're like this cute, sweet family. But Noel and Melly are the first people and the only people who knows about Pies Before Guys and what Daisy does. And at first, it's a source of comfort, but as everything continues, it's a point of not comfort. Noel takes huge issue with the fact that a lot of times these guys end up dying. And you know what? If they were better, the magic would judge them to be so. But that's also, to him, that's like weird. You were just trusting magic to be judge, jury, executioner, you know? So he makes sense as like the angel on the shoulder, and Melly's like the devil on the shoulder, because she is more of enabling of Daisy and what she does and what purpose she finds behind it. Ultimately, book 1 is really to set up the scene, the background, and everything for Daisy. So what we get is the fact that Daisy's past has come back to haunt her. The first person she killed was an accident, but it was her father. Her father apparently also has another family. As a matter of fact, she has a half-brother who is like 12 years older than her. And unfortunately, Daisy is the one who is paying the price, because her brother has been able to track her circumstantially based on she was in this city, somebody died in this city. And it's like, how are you going to track that way? Because a lot of people die everywhere. This is why it's so circumstantial. But he himself is a corrupt businessman trying to get into politics, and eventually that whole scheme folds in on him. And we find that Daisy is capable of more than just murder pies, you know. In the beginning, we are introduced to the fact that she bakes for the student body at a college, and she gives them pies that will give them, you know, strength and helps them to learn. She bakes strength pies for women in, you know, anonymous group meetings who have been abused, to make them stronger. And that's where she meets a lot of the people that may end up being her clients. She does have a very structured way of doing things, which is you have had to have a reference from a previous client, or I guess herself, because she does scout some people. But you have to have a reference from a previous client. You have to fill out all this stuff in order to be able to have her services. It's never paid for. She has to know specific things about the victims, because the magic is tailored specifically for the victim. And then on top of which, she verifies whether or not the stories are true. She does this through, of course, the victim, any photographs they may send her, and also she has access to certain PI websites that she subscribes to. She tries to do what she thinks is above board for a very gray area type of thing. In the first book, she does end up with Noel, who is this great support to her, versus Melly, who is kind of like this. Melly is just wild and crazy and boundary pushing, you know, and she is the wild card in this love triangle, and also just as a companion that Daisy has. So she ends up with Noel, who brings her peace and comfort, and she treats the relationship delicately, but it does cause her a little bit more trouble. However, Noel's important because Noel's farm is an orchard, and she uses those fruits in her pies, which in the first book, she is in a pie baking contest, which she wins. Does she bake good magical feelings into those pies as well? And did it give her an edge? Is it kind of like cheating? Personally, as a reader, I think yes. But if no one can tell the difference, man, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Now, the reason that the pie contest is worth noting is because once she wins this in the second book, she is also a contestant for a baking contest, but it's all sorts of baking. It's not just pies. So she is going to be a contestant among many, many bakers, and it's a whole different setup from the first book. And shout out to Books with Bonnie, by the way. She had asked me in the comments, love you, Bonnie, if my rating for the first book was affected by the second book, because I had read half of the second book before delving into the first book. And you know what? That is a very good question, because it could have, but they're so different that it really didn't. I rated the first book a 5 out of 5. The second book is called A Good Day to Pie, and I also rated that one a 5 out of 5. This one is kind of more of a contained thing, because they're set for this contest that is going to be televised, is in this like very like fancy mansion, castle-ish type of hotel. And there are secret passageways, and basically all your contestants and your judges, these are your pool of suspects when it comes to any murder that's going to happen. And there's more than one murder that happens. There's secret affairs. This is very much touches on all of the things that I think people kind of loved in a tropey way about Agatha Christie mysteries. So the first person to die in the second book is one of the contestants, and they're sequestered here. Like, even if somebody is no longer a contestant in that they've been eliminated, they still have to stay there. There are strict phone rules, as you know, your basic reality TV things. They don't want things to get out before anything airs. Now, unfortunately, in the first few rounds, a contestant dies, and no cops were really called. Like, there was no investigation. It just looked like Chloe, the girl who died, slipped and fell. And then everything just continues until a second murder happens. And now this murder is particularly of interest to Daisy, because she's actually been contacted through Pies Before Guys to bake a pie for that specific judge by his wife. And the way that she got this client was different than what she usually does, because Melly has taken the liberty to help her find more people to help. Basically, like, let me give you more victims, by asking for the help of somebody who is very tech savvy, and all of this works through the dark web, so none of it is traceable through her or to Daisy. But this is the first time that they're testing anything like this. Daisy is uncomfortable about it, but at the same time, Mel pushes boundaries. You can't really rein in Mel, but the more boundaries that it seems Mel starts to push, the more she learns that she can't. And a lot of this book is so much about boundaries and morals and stuff like that. And I really, really enjoyed the way that you can kind of see the characters progress as the series continues, even though it's only like 3 books in. The judge dies, but it wasn't Daisy. In fact, they don't really even get to baking pies until towards the end of the contest. He dies towards the middle, essentially. And now Daisy has to investigate all the suspects. The police are interrogating people really, really hard. And everybody has their own past that they want to win this baking prize money so that they can have a new life. So the reason that I say that is because Daisy doesn't really start putting in the magic into her baking until it gets to her pies. Because remember, her thing is pies. She is pretty much on her own. She makes a few phone calls to Melly, and it's really just to make sure that nothing can be traced to her if the wife, you know, hired somebody else on top of Pies Before Guys. But that's not the case. In fact, the suspect is there with them. And in true dramatic fashion, while they're rolling, after the winner is revealed, Daisy also decides, in memory of Chloe, who in all this is considered like a casualty, she revealed who the killer was. And thanks to the truth-telling in her pies, that killer did feel compelled to confess. I think if you are the type of person who likes those kind of classic detective mysteries that, you know, Agatha Christie brought about, this is definitely one of the stories that you would find entertaining. Again, this was a 5 out of 5 for me. I really, really loved it, and it took me right out of everything that was happening in the first book. Now, moving on to book 3. Book 3 is called The Last to Pie. I also rated this one a 5 out of 5. You can say that I'm biased, but I'm really loving this series. I think it's been great. And more than ever, in book 3, we have all of the moral quandaries. One important thing to know about Daisy is the magic is her legacy, but the pies are just her own thing. Her mother had the magic. It's through the women in her family that this magic moves through them. When her mother was alive, Daisy's mother's magic was in doing hair and styling, and they lived, out of Penny, and she would work on the women with Penny as the salon. Before then, the magic was with her grandmother, who created these amazing clothes for her customers, and all of this was to give them confidence, and all the magic came from a place of love. The first person who has found that she can do it from a place of love and harm is Daisy. And she has nobody in the family left to really guide her in terms of this magic because her mother died a long, long time ago. So she has to deal with that. And Noel is lobbing questions at her like, do you want to have a kid? I know magic runs in the family. You want to have a kid? Like, maybe not with me, but are you thinking about having a kid? Also, I know we haven't been dating that long, but I love you. Do you think about moving in? Maybe in the winter, because you're living out there in Penny in a parking lot, and I know Frank takes good care of you and stuff, but I have this whole, farm situation. A lot of that. Mind you, our main character is 23, 24 years old. It is a big question to be 23 or 24. But for some people, it's very natural. Daisy has lived a very, very unconventional life. But then it comes the question of, can Noel really, in the long term, deal with Daisy and what she believes her purpose is, which is she cannot save a mass amount of women, but she can save the women through pies before guys, one by one. And for all intents and purposes, she never thinks she's going to stop. Noel's big fear, on the other hand, is Daisy being in trouble, where it's too close of a call and he can't help her. And in this book, he may be a little right, but the way that he talks about it comes from selfish reasons, in a sense, because he's kind of disregarding her choice, and he blows up at her a few times, and while his feelings are valid, so are Daisy's. And if he's putting the ball in her court, he has to respect her decision. So what is book 3 about, other than this couple having a little turbulence in paradise? Daisy receives a request from her Pies Before Guys account, and it is from the wife of a police officer, which means she's going to be put way too close to a police officer, and Noel is uncomfortable with this. But on top of which, yes, this person came from a reference, but she can't do the things that, the contract and things that Daisy usually does. What she does is send Daisy photographic proof of her abuse. And Daisy is letting it chill. She has her process, but soon she finds that the woman is missing. And it's her sleuthing ability as well as Melly that they eventually find this woman and are able to save her. Well, at least they try to. And it is a really harrowing story. And it is a really scary, frightening story about someone who in power has so much power and so many places that they could hide and harm someone and keep an eye on them. Ultimately, the woman does gain a new lease on life, and she finds people who do love her, and she's starting to be rebuilt, and I love that for her. During the course of this book, though, Frank, the one person who Daisy feels has been a very positive father figure to her, has a heart attack. And so she feels this urgency inside of her. She's looking for this missing woman, hoping that she's alive and stays alive so she and Melly can get to her. And Her father figure is in the hospital, possibly dying. She's pulled left and right. At one point, she goes under disguise, finds an iPad that the cop has with all the surveillance footage and stuff on it. So she knows the woman is alive, but she still has to find her. And because of that theft, Penny gets broken into because the cop is like, I don't have a warrant. I can't get a warrant for this suspicion that you stole something from me. So while you're away in the hospital, I'm just gonna break in with my boys. It is such a harrowing story, and I think as a reader, it really endeared me to why Daisy does what she does. Although I understand that it's flawed logic, it's serial killer logic, and she can't even come to terms with she's a serial killer, she's a monster, but it's a good cause, and does she want to pass this magic on to another generation? Is that her responsibility? Her answer currently at this age is no. And Mellie redeems herself from book one because Mellie pushed way too many boundaries and in book one really did fully betray Daisy. But she redeems herself somewhat in this one where she fights for Daisy, fights along Daisy, sleuths with her, makes sure that she's safe, goes above and beyond to make sure that Daisy is comfortable in her home again after it's been broken into, and that can feel so violating, and she doesn't even have time to process that information because Frank is in the hospital. And Mellie reminds her, kids don't have to be your legacy. What you're doing right now, giving women another chance at life, another way out, they can have their own kids. But Pies Before Guys can be your legacy. And if you want to have children in the future, that's up to you. But all of that is yours. And no one, not even Noel, should have a say in what you do with your body and what you call your legacy and what you think your purpose is. And I thought that was just... it really touched me. And in that moment, I was like, Mellie is looking so dreamy. Like, I don't think for Daisy she's right, but she is officially my book girlfriend because I love her. She's learning her boundaries. She's learning what she can't push. She's learning better to communicate, and she is so much more of a better communicator than Noel is. A lot of times, it's so weird, but everybody has their flaws. As for Daisy and Noel, they're just taking it step by step. This book really gave me the kick that I needed in terms of like emotional adrenaline, and I loved it. I would rate this book, I rated it a 5 out of 5. It is really like a 10 out of 5. Like, it is so good. It is like above and beyond where I thought this series was going to go. I don't know if you can wash away being a serial killer, but once again, let me remind you, a lot of people like Dexter, so I wouldn't be too harsh to judge our magical little pie girl, okay? I actually didn't research if there was another book coming out. I really hope there is. Where it stopped, I just can't imagine it ending there. And I want to see more of Daisy, and I want to see more of Mel, and I need to see Frank up and okay again. Like, I am just attached to these characters, and I really loved Noel in the beginning, and right now he is on thin ice. Anyway, if you've watched this far, thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.